This is the B-Team Podcast, brought to you by Jackrabbit Illustrated. The B-Team is presented by Drake's Place in Battle, South Dakota, and sponsored by Jackrabbit Central and Shenanigans in Sioux Falls. Now, here are your B-Team hosts, Brendan and Ben.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the B-Team Podcast on the Splitting Hares Podcast Network, obviously a part of Jackrabbit Illustrated, probably also on the FCS Fans Network, broadcasting network of podcasts, and brought to you by Drake's Place up in Bowdle, South Dakota, and Cottonwood Coffee and Bistro. Big shout out to Chad. No awkward jump between the videos. That is a first. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign going into the finals, in the semifinals. But Ben, we're joined with a very special guest today, Zach Borg from Dakota News Now, award-winning Zach Borg from Dakota News Now. How are you doing? And thanks for joining us.
I appreciate the award-winning plug there. I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? You guys getting thunder snow yet?
Working on
it. Saw a little bit of lightning, but
same here.
I'd say you deserve that award. You are the guy that I see at every single sporting event I go to. I'm like, oh, there's Zach again.
Unless
you have a twin.
Technically,
everywhere.
Technically, I haven't really won the awards. I've been nominated for them, but I was nominated for an Emmy, and I got I guess it was an award of merit, but for another one, but it wasn't like the. So I'm still going for my FCS championship in a way.
There you go.
So you know how we feel. You just got to keep fighting for that.
Exactly.
Fighting for that big one. Yeah. Well, yeah, like Ben said, we see on the sidelines of every Jackrabbit sporting game. It feels like, really glad that you could join us here tonight. We had one hell of a game last weekend. Really excited. I know Ben was happy, particularly with the play calling. So,
I'm not saying it's because Coach X's wife was tuned into our broadcast and actually chimed in, but it might be. It might be because they listened to me. But yeah, they finally ran the ball and made it a priority. It was nice to see. I went back and looked at our kind of drive breakdowns, and I don't think there was a drive that was less than 2-to-1 run to pass ratio, which hadn't been the case. It had been pretty much opposite of that leading up to that game. So it was really refreshing to see, even when we were down at the start of the second half. You would have think, well, geez, we need to press a little bit. We need to pass the ball, but we trusted the run game. It worked. And it worked out.
Sorry, my lights just flickered on and off for a second.
Oh boy.
It's going to be a really interesting podcast if everything goes dim.
I hope you have
that was a first.
Hopefully, I hope you have a premium power provider like Brendan.
Yeah. Everybody, if my power goes out and I disappear, I want you all to know that the person directly responsible for all of it is the guy who just talked about how premier my electrical co-op is. And talked me into signing a waiver into letting him put new power poles on my property.
I do. My day job is Sioux Valley Energy, so yes, I would be partially responsible.
It's fully at this point.
I thought the other thing to pick up what you were saying about the run game too, it also that they stayed committed to it even without Pierre Strong, who it was kind of surprising. They never really mentioned that much in the broad. I was waiting for a shot of him on the sideline or something. Right? It's like you wouldn't have known he was even in the. Because I picked it up a little late. I was trying to do a live stream on our Facebook page, and I was just getting it going, and I'm like, kind of dawned on me, like, third drive, I haven't seen Pierre much, and he's got 3 carries for 17 yards. You'd think they'd be running him more, but Villanova kind of knew what was coming, and they didn't really stop it. And as much as we talk about the running game too, the pass plays they did mix in because they did need to throw it a little more in the second half. But the pass plays they put in were pretty good ones, and they really, obviously the run game is what is the bread and butter now. But I thought they did enough passing to keep Villanova honest and make some plays. And certainly Yankee, the Yankee boys have been great all year, but I thought Oladokin made some really good throws. And the wind was a factor there too. I mean, there was a punt. I remember they almost said went off SDSU during the second half. I mean, the wind was a factor, throwing into it, kicking into it. So all in all, even though I thought it was kind of a nice balanced game, whereas as we were saying, that second half of Sacramento State was a little iffy.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that I enjoyed was them running to open up the pass game. I mean, we've had a good pass game all year, but it just seemed like at times we relied on it too heavily. It seemed like in this game they more set it up with the run, which I think is a good game plan for us going forward, and I hope we continue that. So one of the things I noticed when I was looking at your Twitter, Zach, is you do a live chat during Jackrabbit games. You do that for every game or just the last one? Or
it's been for the 2 playoff games.
Okay.
I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with these games because obviously during the spring season, I made the decision to start going live, doing a live sportscast from each playoff game. And I went live after the State U game and the Dakota Marker game this year. Kind of the big one, you bring the big game, you want to bring the big guns out. And had USD advanced past Southern Illinois, I probably would have gone to Fargo and done one for them too, to be fair. But I was sitting there and I'm just like, what can we do to try and maybe get people involved in this, get some interaction? I just thought, let's do a Facebook Live. It's very bare bones, and we'll be doing one. I'll mention this toward the end. We'll be doing another one this week, but just kind of a way to get interactive. And I knew there were a lot of people having issues finding the game. I mean, I get questions like, why aren't you televising it? And I'm like, well, we don't really have the rights to it. That's kind of out of our range, but it was a way, I'm not going to say we did incredible numbers, but I think we had about 20 to 30 people who stayed on for most of the streams. My phone kept falling down, which was because I had to do it on my phone at my desk because we were obviously having to pull in the video stream of the game, which is priority 1. So hopefully what we do this week will be a little better produced since it's on ESPN2 and we don't have to grab it off the web, but it was fun. It was kind of a watch along. You saw my reaction. I saw it kind of got a little, once I figured out what I was doing, I got a little more of a handle on chatting with people, and I'll certainly try to do that a little bit better. But so it was a good time. Again, I prefer they be in Brookings, even because I wouldn't be able to do a live chat from the press box. They'd get a little annoyed at me. But it just a good way to kind of hopefully get fans involved and chat with people, and I hopefully I'll get a little more this week since, again, the game's on ESPN2. You don't necessarily have to flip between internet browsers this time, so it worked good. So
if we make it to Frisco, will you go down, and did you go last year?
I'm hoping to. I was all set to. I had kind of a complicated situation. I'd gotten COVID toward the end of March, and I'd gotten my first shot. It was actually right as I got my first shot. It was that week they beat Southern Illinois, actually. I remember I did a Zoom. With Stiglmeyer and Davis, and that was, of course, Davis's coming out party, really, when Pierre was hurt. But I remember feeling kind of weird that week and just kind of persisted. And then I got diagnosed with COVID, and they gave me during it. I mean, I never felt like deathly ill, but it hit me pretty hard. And they offered my wife and my son got it. Didn't really hit them too badly either. But they offered my wife and I kind of this it was an antibody type treatment. I know it made some news recently. People were thinking it was an alternative to the vaccine, which it wasn't. We had it, since we had the COVID, they just gave us some antibodies, and that but by taking that I had to wait another 3 months to get my second shot. And our company, the rule was to go down to Frisco, you had to be fully vaccinated. And I tried to explain that I had the antibodies, but it just didn't work. So I'm hoping, because Mark Ovenden, who of course I should reference here a lot, he's been my boss forever. We were planning to go down and take the trip and do a bunch of live stuff down there. Didn't quite work out. He did a good job with our photographer Adam Huntemer, who's an SDSU alum, who I think enjoyed that trip as well. So yeah, I'm hoping this year we're going to start going into a little more of a planning mode. I don't think we want to jinx it just yet, but right. Going to a planning mode, and I'm hoping. I've wanted to do that trip forever because they've been in the playoffs enough, and I followed them to a semifinal in Fargo. I followed them out this year to Fort Collins, which is my alma mater. So it's one of those. And now I feel like I can't jinx them because I feel like whenever I follow a team to an NCAA tournament, they lose. So they lost when I wasn't there. So clearly my presence isn't going to impact anything anymore. So yeah, I'm definitely hoping to get out there and do some stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of planning ahead, it's kind of nice that there's 2 weeks instead of the 1 week like there was in the spring. That's a game changer.
Especially with this team too, and they've had to put so many miles on this road trip. I mean, I'm sure they're going to need that extra week or two of rest and to kind of regroup a little bit. Although sometimes you always wonder too if they like the way this team's played on the road. Maybe they just like kind of constantly going and not really being able to think about anything.
I know. They're speaking of the wear and tear, things like that. A lot of guys are banged up and all that jazz. But Terry Jungan asks if there's any update on PS2. I know personally from what we've heard is it's day-to-day with concussion protocol. I know Matt Zimmer on his podcast had said that he thinks he'll play as long as he passes the concussion protocol. Have you heard anything differently than that? Do you have any super duper insider info more than anybody else?
I'd love to tell you. No, like I said, I sat in on the press conference yesterday, and it was weird too because during the game I swear they said it was a leg injury, and I'm like, that's what I called it on my. I called it on my broadcast that it was. I slow-moed the 17-yard run where he went out, and I'm like, I don't really see how he hurt his leg there, but
right.
My gut feeling is he's going to play. I mean, you can't. You got to be careful with that. I'll go back to my experience as a fan with Patrick Mahomes. It seemed like he took a hell of a lot worse of a header in that Cleveland playoff game a year ago, and suddenly he was out there a couple days later in the AFC title game. But we'll see. I mean, college-wise, they do have to be a lot more careful because I'm sure the insurance and stuff is insurance and medical things. They got to be a little more careful at. But I would be shocked if he's not playing if it's truly that bad. And if it's truly that bad and he can't play, then he shouldn't.
Yeah, I agree. Jim here mentions, it's 3 weeks between the semis and the championship, which is nice for planning. However, if you are even thinking about going, book a hotel room right now. Yes. I'm saying right now, do not wait until Saturday. Because NDSU and JMU play Friday night, they will know where they're going, and the hotel rooms will be gone, literally gone. When NDSU plays anybody there, especially if it's NDSU, the hotel rooms will be gone. If it's JMU, they will also be mostly gone. So go book those now. Find a cancel for free one if you can. Booking.com has plenty of those. Go do that. Also, there are still FCS championship tickets available. Go buy one now. They're I think they're $80 in the end zone, $99 in the corners, and you're not going to find it for cheaper than that. Number one. Number two, if we for some reason don't make it to Frisco, you'll be able to sell them to either Montana State or JMU or NDSU fans. So this is a call to all Jacks fans to go make your plans now, buy your stuff. If you have to cancel, you have to cancel, but if you wait too long, you're just not going to get to go.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
I booked my flight. I'm going no matter what. So this is kind of cheating, but I don't think the NCAA could be any happier with the potential matchups because Montana State's going to bring a bunch of people. We brought a pile of people on 1 week's notice with COVID rules in place. And then obviously, the Hairy Cows up north, and then JMU, they're both known for bringing a lot of people. So no matter what the matchup is, they're going to make money out of their minds. But I am telling you, and tell your friends and whatever, the possibility is real enough of a marker game rematch down there. And that will be the hottest ticket in FCS history. I promise you. Get it now. If that, and we're not saying this to jinx it. We're saying 100% you can sell these. Okay, you'll be fine. This has nothing to do with I'm going for sure. It has to go with covering your tails and making sure we get as much blue in the stands if we should make it is the important thing there.
Well, and I'll say this too. I mean, even if you don't go to the game, go to the tailgate. I mean, I'm assuming everything will be everything will be somewhat back to normal. And like you said, I didn't go. My wife went, and obviously I spoke with our guys who did go, and it was a pretty good for, I think, some limited attendance and COVID spring season. It was really good last year. So I would assume, especially if it is NDSU and SDSU, it's going to be the tailgate alone will probably be worth the entertainment of whatever happens in the game. So even if you can't, just try and get away. It's probably going to be nicer down there than it will be here in January. So,
right. Yeah, well, hopefully the weather's nicer than last time. We got a little wet during the tailgate last time.
I don't think that. Well, I was going to say I don't think there'll be lightning, but tonight's kind of proven me wrong on that one.
Yeah, Frisco's historically for the championship games had like 70-degree days before the game and then just taken a nosedive into terrible. So pack warm. I'm going to guilt trip everybody right now who's watching this. If you haven't gotten a championship ticket, do you want to have that feeling of sitting at home and watching a possible Marker Game 2.0 and watching our boys down there in a hostile environment because you didn't feel like getting a ticket just in case? Just let that regret just percolate and then chew on it.
I'm kind of curious because I know NDSU people, they used to buy those tickets out the year before. Yes. I'm kind of curious. I know they didn't really do that for the spring season, even though that had been, that was cobbled together a little bit, but and there's been a lot of talk about, well, the interest is down this year. So I don't know if they sold as many tickets down to Frisco this year. So there might be more of an opening than there would have been, say, if this had happened in 2019, 18, 17, whatever.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely more tickets available now than there normally is during NDSU's run. And, my fear is that people are thinking, well, I was able to get a ticket pretty easily in the spring, and that was only a 1 week notice. This is a 3 week notice. I should really be able to get a ticket. No, that's not the case at all. It's complete opposite of that. And somebody asked about the allotment for SDSU. It's not going to be enough. We will not get as many fans as we had down there before. You will be out and you won't get a ticket. So get them now. If you end up getting an allotment, great. You can sell your other ticket.
Can we move it to Jerry World? I feel like if they moved it to Jerry World for Saturday, they would get about 30,000.
We were trying to push for that last year when there was all that rain in the forecast. We were telling them they should move it inside. But
well, and since we've been speaking up the potential and things like that of that team up north, and Dustin Helton will not shut up about it because he's a friend and that's what friends do. If I will be wearing an NDSU shirt or jersey Friday night in Frisco. For those of you who haven't heard or seen on Twitter, obviously you know me. That is not by choice.
Oh no!
There goes his power.
And we lost Brendan, but Brendan was going to say how the FCS Fans Nation, one of the admins, the unbiased Bison admin, Matt Frazee, brought about a GoFundMe for the Treehouse charity up in Fargo. And what they do is they put, you can read on this GoFundMe here, but they put meals into kids that are food insecure during the weekends. They have food during the weeks when they go to school and they need coats and stuff, and they're doing all that. And they had bets that if we were to raise a certain amount, Brendan's number was, I think, $4,000. He'd wear NDSU green on Friday. Of course, the game's Saturday. There is a tattoo up for grabs at $15,000. I have not updated this page, but I will right now.
Yes.
And we'll see. We're at $7,130. I feel like the guy's getting the Montana tattoo.
I hope he does.
I reckon I worked in Fargo for a couple of years. I think that's the Central Cast Squirrels. One of my favorite nicknames that I've ever come across, because I could never figure out why anybody would want to be named the Squirrels, the Fighting Squirrels.
Yeah,
you think it'd be rock? You think it'd be the Spuds? I think they finally brought back like the baked potato mascot they used to have. The one that I'm still shocked that is still in existence is it's in Dickinson, and there's a town in Esterville, Iowa called the Midgets.
Yeah, I know.
I'm shocked that has not gone away in either one in 2021.
I grew up playing two schools in my high school conference called the Midgets.
And they call the girls' team the Midgets.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that one. That's up there.
I know that was what I believe I know Esterville's in one because we've had obviously with what we do on our Football Fridays, we cover the Iowa schools quite a bit, and they seem to be like a regular playoff opponent around here. And we get the logo and it's a little guy. I mean, it's just, you look at this and you're like, how is this still a thing in 2021? But
you are right. It is the Central Cast Treehouse, and if anyone's interested, if anyone knows who Kyler Neal is, he's part of the FCS Fans Nation crew. He has said that if
SDSU.
He definitely does. If he has said that if it reaches 15,000, he will get a tattoo saying "Go Grizz" on him somewhere. I think it's playing for his rear. And so we need to make sure it gets there. Matt, apparently there'll be an article come out in the Washington Post tomorrow covering this. So we're hoping to get some real traction, can get up there. So we're hoping to get on ESPN, him on ESPN too. We'll see.
Yep. There's talks. It's in discussions that he might end up on the ESPN2 broadcast as well over it. So I got a feeling Kyler's getting buried, which would just be, God, that made me giddy as a little schoolgirl because that'd be funny. So that was our little tootle off into the trees there. But that's why if people are wondering, if you do see me, there will be pictures. I'm sure of it. I lived in Fargo for 6 years. I'm going to have many friends who are going to be reveling in seeing me in the colors that, if you combine, look like poop. And so that's how that's going to go. But it was for a good cause. Worked out, huge amount of money raised, and it's really, really an awesome deal. And yes, thank you to anyone who did donate. Speaking
of other news, well, first of all, did your power go out or not? Because we lost you for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just went, oh, snap, reload page. And I'm like,
all right.
What?
So that's good news for me. I really was worried about that. Lonnie asked any chance Chase Norblade plays on Saturday. I haven't heard anything about Chase. Yeah. Zach, did you hear anything in the media?
No. Okay. I'm kind of curious to see if Malik Lofton. I mean, he was the one that was, because the two I was told were out were the last game were Lofton. They left him behind in Brookings with a back injury, and then I think Gales was sick and I don't know. I don't think he played. I think they took him, but they were doubtful. I know Stig had mentioned they took an extra person down there and ended up dressing him, or so. I would assume Gales would be back. You'd think he's over whatever I would think if it were COVID, we would have heard by now. So he's probably over whatever he had. Right. And then with Lofton, you don't know with a back. So
it kind of sounds like a sickness went through the team a little bit. I've heard through the grapevine that the whole line was calling it their flu game because they all got hammered with it right before they went out, and then obviously
you wouldn't know the way they played. Goodness,
God, right?
They were blasting people about 4 or 5. I mean, and they wore Villanova down, but they were blasting about 4 or 5 yards off the line at one point. So it just, I was. If they were sick, they certainly did not show it.
They had a sick performance, but not in that way.
But should we move on to recapping how the picks went last week and the other games in the quarters? Okay, so the first one was the NDSU game, and it went all kind of how we thought it would. They beat East Tennessee 27-3, covered their spread. Not really much to gather from that game. So I mean, we'll see how NDSU does against JMU. JMU whooped Montana. That was surprising. They beat Montana 28-6. That was a lot more convincing than I thought.
I mean, they went down,
and they lost to Kim. They're leading. So you lost your lead receiver and your quarterback. I mean that. Because I thought Montana's defense actually kind of held them in check, kept them in the game, but against the front that JMU has, without your starting quarterback, without your game-breaking receiver, and Montana's had so many really good receivers the last couple of years, they were kind of behind the. I see that comment there. They were behind the 8 ball a little bit, and I've heard and I worked a little out there. I worked in Missoula in 2009-10, and still follow some people, and of course, there's always a 24/7 rivalry with Montana State, which we can get into when we start talking the games. But they're pretty upset about the bracket they got put in. That Montana State seemingly had the easier draw. Although I would argue playing a team that had won 22 straight didn't look like that easy of a draw. But especially when your quarterback quit at the end of the season or entered the transfer portal, to be fair. So the Montana people are kind of upset that they felt they should have gotten a much better and I can't argue. I think maybe they should have been the 4th seed, but they also lost at home to Sacramento State. So, the complaining out there is probably in Missoula is probably a product of the fact that they're now watching their rival, especially watching their rival who they whooped, move to the semifinals and host no less.
Yeah, I don't think there's many people that feel sorry for Montana though, especially the way their fans act sometimes. And Dustin asked, do the playoffs count since Montana lost? They did, but probably not since now they're out. These don't count anymore.
It's a shame we flew all the way to Philadelphia for nothing.
Right.
Bobby Hawk's finding it. He's kind of getting a bit of a rude awakening in his 2.0 because the FCS was so much different when he had them rolling in the 2000s. It's just the playoff field expanded, the seeding. They used to always get the home games. The Valley, you can look back at history, but probably the biggest mistake the Big Sky made was not adding NDSU and SDSU because that was the original preferred destination for both schools. I think they certainly found their better fit, and certainly you look at what happened with UND when they were in the Big Sky. I mean, that was a disaster from a budget standpoint. So ended up in a much better situation, but by not inviting SDSU and NDSU, they ended up giving the Missouri Valley probably extra bids, and that was where you can kind of point to the turnaround of when did the Big Sky kind of go from being maybe 1-2 to 2-3 behind this conference. It was when they said no to SDSU and NDSU. And imagine how much different that conference would be today if those two schools were in. And you probably would have the other two Dakota schools as well.
That would be great. It's just a crazy conference to think about, from
it still is because it's
a football standpoint.
It's so big. You could have a conference title game, but they don't really do that in the FCS unless it's the SWAC. It's just, that conference. But Hawk, he dominated. And that was in an era too where they would play Division II schools every year and still make the playoffs, even though those don't count. So, he's trying to bring back that old swagger they had, and I think they'll start getting to that upper echelon again, but I think it's as much because of the fact that Sam Houston and James Madison are leaving as it is anything Montana is necessarily doing.
So speaking of that, I want your quick take on that. What do you think that it's a good idea for them to go, and do you think that SDSU, NDSU should also be thinking about it?
You mean with JMU and
Sam Houston?
Well, I don't necessarily like seeing them go because I like the playoff system, but I had a good back and forth with some fans when I made a comment to that effect, and I can't really argue with JMU. They're in a big market. They got a big enrollment. That stadium is gorgeous. I wasn't there in person when SDSU lost, but I've seen enough of it. They've got the location to do it. They're in the South, prime real estate, good TV market. It makes more sense for them. And the Sun Belt's a little more stable. It's geographically a little better fit. Sam Houston and all these teams going to the what was Conference USA, I think that's a gamble because that conference is just falling apart. And I don't know if it's going to – that's just making a money grab at this point because I think everybody's looking at what the deals are now as opposed to what they're going to be when they're up for renegotiation. That's another topic for a point, but – right. Rights fees have exploded. They're not going to be paying what they did in the previous deals, especially when some of these conferences are just totally stripped of what they were. So, I think James Madison makes sense. I would not right now if I were South Dakota State. I would not I don't think North Dakota State can. Frankly, the issues for NDSU are the same that SDSU would have. The location is not terrific, although I would say South Dakota is better than North Dakota for a visit. But we're not really – the only conference that we'd really be in the footprint of would be the Mountain West. I'm a CSU alum. I don't see them expanding to the FCS. They're going to want an all-sport member. So I don't see the football-only thing happening. I know that's kind of NDSU's pipe dream.
Right.
So if you had an all sports membership, you'd have a conference that stretches to California. We'll talk about this more in the NDSU term right now. How are you going to afford to fly Bison volleyball, Bison basketball, Bison softball out to California every couple of weeks? I know the football program makes a lot of money, but it doesn't cover that many bills. So they would have a lot of issues, I think, with that. And they're, like I said, they're even more landlocked. Technically, our television market here in the Sioux Falls, Brookings, we're the bigger television market, technically.
Right.
So technically, you'd be adding more eyes to your television package by adding the Sioux Falls DMA, which Brookings, Vermilion Falls, and then you would the Fargo one. Obviously, we know the Bison brand is a little different because they've been on national TV so much, but yeah, I think some of the South ones are certainly in play. I see a commenter mentioning the MAC too. That would make a little more sense for them, but the one that I think, but as I've said a lot, again, coming from a Group of 5 conference, if you're not in those Power 5, it really doesn't matter. I mean,
right.
We've been complaining about our TV deal in the Mountain West for years, and I get that it would be a step up in money for SDSU and NDSU, but you're not, you got to realize at some point you're not going to be able to compete for a championship anymore. I think the Bison people believe they could go to FBS and end up in the playoffs within 10 years. It's not going to happen because I don't think they'll ever let those conferences. Cincinnati's probably going to get run by about 30 or 40. I love that they're in it, but when Alabama beats the you-know-what out of them, they're going to use that to justify, we should never let the unwashed masses back in our playoff again. As if, and that doesn't really matter. They want to keep the money to themselves, but then they'll have the justification of what happened. So, but I do think eventually you'll see the Group of 5 reorganize, hold its own playoff. You'll see the Power 5 maybe split off altogether. So eventually I do think there will come a day where SDSU, NDSU, they'll all need to kind of think about moving up to whatever that is. I just don't know if it's worth spending all the money and the budget issues that you would have being northern schools like this to do it. Whereas James Madison, they're in a much better position being in the South. Like I said, even Sam Houston maybe a little more, but again, I think that conference is just it seems like they're just being held together by sticks right now. It's like, I'm looking for the foundation is not good in that conference. So I think that's a very risky move.
Well, I appreciate your take on it. I had to get it because I saw some tweets about it that you'd made, so I figured you had some strong words about it. So similar to what we've said in here as well regarding the move up. But getting back to the quarters, Dustin mentioned the CUSA is a bigger dump than Sam Houston's football stadium. If anybody
which
caught
we're going to get into,
if anybody caught that game, which is the next game we're going to, it was tough to see. Like you couldn't. It looked like they had a power outage. It looked like half of them were off.
Bowers Stadium, I think is the name.
They were 7.5-point favorites. They lost to Montana State 42-19. Montana State took it to them, and it might have been because they couldn't see very well.
Montana State did not have that problem though.
Yeah, Brennan's dog must be going crazy in the background again. Sorry about that.
It happens. No, I mean, Ben, I don't know if everybody watching saw this. I posted the picture to Twitter. The offensive coordinator for Sam Houston State, who's now going to be the coach of Delaware, sitting there outside the press box, not in the press box. Their offensive coordinator is not in the press box, and he's got a headlamp like he's about to go track a deer. I got that one over there. Finish the game. We'll go get it. And, looking at his call seat with a flipping headlamp on. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's FBS, baby. My God. It was – and just getting ragged on by the announcers, it was hilarious. As far as the game goes, though, I mean, before they just got blitzkrieged by Montana State. Before they even knew it was happening, they were down 28-0, and that game was – for all purposes, just done. It was done. They couldn't come back.
Yeah, I saw. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Zach.
No, Jim Poppin just kind of mentioned it, and I listened to the coach, Casey Keeler for Sam Houston. He made a point after he gave Montana their credit, but he said he felt his team kind of ran out of gas after the spring season too. He said this was he said he saw during the week in practice that they weren't practicing well. He claimed that was the first time he'd seen that through the spring season and into the fall. I don't know what to make of that. I would he have been saying that if the game had been closer or if they'd won? I don't know. I've asked Stiglmeyer quite a bit about that. Now we're getting snow out here, so I just looked outside and saw my grill's covered with snow. I asked Stiglmeyer about that, and he's kind of said over the year, look, we've reduced our practice schedule. There you go. We reduced our practice schedule. This week he said they've been cutting, like, the players, I think, asked to cut like 40 minutes off it. So, if they're that, I get that this was a unprecedented situation to play a spring and a fall season, but I gotta think he wasn't practicing them full speed, full contact. I'm sure he did things too, and of course there's rumor. We'll see about Keeler. I mean, I've heard he's not all that hip to making this FBS move, so maybe there's just some other stuff going on there.
Yeah, and you talk about the Montana JMU game getting out of hand because of a circumstance, the Montana quarterback. This game, the score is a lot more lopsided than it should have been because Sam Houston threw 3 interceptions, and Montana State, it seemed like every 50-50 ball they threw up, they got. And that's not going to happen every game for them. They've been touting how their new quarterback is just killing it, but what did he throw, like 15 passes or something like that? And
it was 11.
Yeah. So it wasn't many. So I think that'll be a key for us is to number one, not turn the ball over like that, because I think Montana State's an offense that thrives on turnovers. They're not going to consistently generate points on their own. They need that defense, that very good defense, to give them the ball. And number two, we're going to have to make them pass the ball, make him prove that he can throw it. Because I think that's why he wasn't the starter in the first place, was because he didn't have a great throwing arm, was a little too inconsistent, and so that's why they had this other guy playing. Well, they finally decided they're going to give this guy a chance, and he's done okay. Obviously, yeah. If you zoom in there, how many? It was like, is he? 6
it was 11.
6 for 11
or 8 for 11. I
8
think.
for 11.
Well, and I was going to say something to the quarterback situation. Theirs was unique because it wasn't so much that he overtook them. Their quarterback was a guy, Matt McKay. He 48 hours before their game with Martin, which was in the second round, he entered the transfer portal. I mean, he basically just quit on his team 48 hours before a play. I know this portal thing is kind of entering its own universe these days, and I checked his Twitter today. I haven't seen him commit to. He was a transfer from NC State to begin with, and so I really didn't think Montana State would be long for the playoffs because of that. Now, I think this Malott kid, he's a local kid from Butte, which is, I think it's about an hour and a half down the road. Been a while since I've been to Butte, America, but he's obviously got the fan support behind him. I think he would anyway if he weren't a local kid. And I think the team that's really got to be kicking themselves right now is Missouri State, because I think if it had been if Missouri State doesn't turn the ball over, I think it was 6 times against Martin.
Yes.
I think Missouri State, with what had happened, goes in there and beats Montana State. And then they go to Sam Houston, then we see what happens. But Missouri State's got to be, and they've now had 2 first-round exits because they had a good spring season. They lost at North Dakota. So, Montana State, I'm trying not to take anything away from Montana State. I think they're good, but there were some things that certainly at least have helped them along the way, getting a weaker opponent, I think, in Martin. And then the way that Sam Houston game went, you run the Philly special on your first touchdown play. Next play is a pick. Next play was a really good throw. That throw he put for the second touchdown was right on the money. But it was kind of that was Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong did, and that was just, even at home, that's a tough start to overcome.
Yeah,
so I was going to say, we'll see, if they keep having that luck. We saw a team like Sam Houston last year that just made a run, and it seemed like everything that could go right did go right for them to make the championship. Maybe Montana State's got that kind of destiny, but you think the other shoe will drop at some point for them.
Well, yeah, Montana State, their biggest thing in that whole game was Sam Houston saw that game against Tennessee Martin, and they decided that, you know what, these guys can't pass, because he did not have a good game against, Tennessee Martin. He just didn't. So they went make the young guy pass and beat us, and to his credit, he hit some huge throws that was able to loosen them up. Running the ball, they were not nearly as successful running the ball until that last, I think it was 75-yard touchdown that Ifonse ran. That really sprung him. And I would argue that SDSU's run defense is at least on par with Sam Houston's.
I would probably say a little better. Yeah, I would say they're better. I don't, it's interesting because the last two playoff opponents were really, you kind of kept hearing about how they had running back by committee. They didn't necessarily have one great runner. They had 3 or 4. And sometimes that's code to me for, well, they don't really have one. It's not like at SDSU where you legitimately have the 2 best, maybe the 2 best in all of the subdivision. But yeah, I mean, this is a little more interesting because they have some more star guys. They do have a guy whose numbers match up with Pierre Strong's, like a workhorse running back. They've got some really good receivers. Obviously, the question is how good is the quarterback going to keep playing? Can he keep this level up? My hunch is I think SDSU will play the run well. I think the only guy who really had a decent game against them was probably Nate Thomas out of USD, and he had good games against everybody. So I think they'll. I mean, the wild cards maybe Malott because we saw the guy. I think it was Daniel Smith last week. I was impressed with him as a quarterback. I think Smith kind of reminds me a little of Malott. He's not quite as big, but similar. I mean, he didn't have a great arm, but he made some things happen. He put some 50-50 balls up, and SDSU struggled. That was my concern. It kind of reminded me for a while of what happened in that Northern Iowa game where they kept giving up the 40-yard bombs to Isaiah Weston, even though Northern Iowa couldn't run.
Right.
So, I mean, that's, like you said, are they going to win those 50-50 balls? Hopefully SDSU figured some stuff out with their zone, and hopefully they're a little healthier in their defensive backfield. But there are some concerns there, but I just don't see Montana State running for 200 or so. And their coach, Brent Vegan, is a former NDSU guy. He knows this I think you see a little Missouri Valley in them, which is maybe a reason they'll claim Big Sky pride, but I that's why I think they've maybe been this good. They do emphasize the run. They're a physical defensive team, but I think SDSU in the trenches is very good, and I just don't see Montana State having a big running day unless that quarterback escapes pressure and breaks off big run after big run.
Certainly. Finishing up the games from last week, obviously SDSU beat Villanova 35-21, covered their spread. So now we head into the semifinals. We've got the 2 games, one on Friday night. The first one is JMU, number 3 in the seeds, goes to number 2 NDSU. NDSU is a 5.5-point favorite in that one. My take on this one is I think that it's going to be a rough game either way. I think NDSU is going to want to send JMU back into the FBS. JMU is going to want to make a statement on their way out. I do like the way James Madison's been playing, especially since they lost their game to Villanova, correct? Yep. They've been playing very good football.
That was a little fluky, too. Their field goal kicker, who's one of the best in the FCS, missed a couple of kind of chip shots for him. So that loss to Villanova was a little fluky in and of itself.
Yeah. And NDSU has been playing good football, too. But again, they certainly got the easiest route to this game in their quadrant of the bracket. So, I mean, this will be certainly their toughest test thus far. It'll be interesting to see how JMU does going into the Fargo Dome.
Yeah, I think JMU has the offense to be able to jump ahead and do what you need to do against NDSU, and that's make them chase points. That's what we've done on 3 of the last 4 wins in the last against NDSU. We jumped ahead by, 14 to 17 points, make them chase points. They hate to do that. It's not a knock on NDSU. Their offense isn't built that way. That's not what they're designed to do. I just don't know if JMU is going to be able to do that is the trick, because they're not a great running team. And if you're not a great running team and you pass a lot, you allow that defensive line for NDSU to tee off. James Madison doesn't have an amazing offensive line. They have a pretty good one that's really young, going to be playing in the loudest hostile environment they've had to play in this year. I just don't see that working out too well for them. But I'd like to think they keep it close. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of close games up there in the playoffs. Once they start pulling away, it just snow piles on you and you're in trouble. So,
well, of course, they were one of the few programs that's ever gone in there and won. The only one in the FCS there. Although they are a coach removed. Yeah. Their quarterback, I can't remember if his name is Cole. I know his name is Cole Johnson. For some reason, I saw Cole Kelly in the chats. Their quarterback is electric. I think he is a Peyton finalist, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's a little more legitimate Peyton finalist than the running back who got it over SDSU, over Strong. But yeah, I think to me this comes down to can James Madison force Cam Miller or Quincy Patterson to beat them? That's what SDSU did in Brookings. Now there's a couple interesting factors because they don't know if they're going to have Christian Watson. He's been dealing with something. I've listened to some of their pregame shows up there. They had some other receivers. I mean, they could be potentially down to second, third string receivers. I do think James Madison's defense can hold. You're not going to entirely stop NDSU's run game. That's their bread and butter. If you can hold them under 200, you maybe have a chance. If you can hold them under 150, you probably got a really good chance. Yep. But none of the two teams they played, Southern Illinois, I found Southern Illinois to be a very disappointing team because I thought after they won up here, they were going to make a run at this thing, and they just fell apart. I think not having Stone Labanowitz hurt them more than their coaching staff wants to admit. But they have not been in a position where Cam Miller has had to put the game on his shoulders, or Quincy Patterson, who they thought was going to be the all-world quarterback and never really was before he got hurt. So if they can contain, that's where I think they can beat them because they may even out, but I could see Cam, and he hasn't played badly. He's been better than he was in the spring, but he has not really been put under the fire in this playoff. He hasn't had to. They beat East Tennessee, but that game they just didn't look very inspired. There was only 14-0 at half. So that to me is going to be the thing. Can they force NDSU in a position where Cam Miller is going to have, or again, maybe they go to Patterson, who knows, where their quarterback has to make plays to win the game. And if they do that, I think they can sneak out of there with a win.
Yeah, and I think the key is, like Brendan said, I think it'll be JMU's O-line has to play really, really well because NDSU can get after the quarterback. And if they're able to get to Cole Johnson, it's going to be game over because I think the key is going to be for Cole Johnson to have a really big, good game and make them chase points, like Brendan said, and then also make NDSU throw. But sometimes that's easier said than done. So, yeah, I guess I
would just say root for them to kill each other. Root for them. Exactly. I know we've got 3 weeks ahead of this game, but those are two very physical teams. You know, I'm not saying root for. I guess I shouldn't say root for injury, but even with 3 weeks, I mean that could be a game where the winner takes a big toll. One of those Pyrrhic victories where you won, but you're going to come out of that pretty banged up.
Certainly. So as far as the pick goes, I'm going to take JMU plus 5.5. I think it's a safe bet because I do see either way. I think it'll be a 3 or 4 point game. Brendan, what do you got?
5.5. I'll take NDSU. They're gonna either score the last touchdown to go up by 6 or more, or they're gonna kick the field goal to put it out of reach at the end. So I will eat the points with NDSU because I got a gain on you because I'm down 3 games and there's only 3 games left.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go opposite of me here on out. Zach, would you like to pick against the spread? 5.5 points.
I think I'll take JMU. I think I still kind of think NDSU wins, but I think it's going to be that's. I think it'll be inside. I could see it being inside that number. I could see it being a 3-point game, a field goal. I think it's going to be very. I think we said what the over under was something like 47.5. I mean, I could see it being a very low scoring game. NDSU's got a lot of offensive injuries right now. Their defense is great, though, and like you mentioned, that offensive line for Madison has its issues. But I think it's I think it's a very tight coming down to the last second thing. But I could also see your point, Brendan, where they just tack on a late touchdown after a 13 or 14 play drive. Their usual Fargo Dome magic or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate being part of the Fade Brendan Get Rich segment brought to you by Shenanigans Pub of Sioux Falls, which if you don't have any plans to go to Bozeman or if you don't have any plans to watch at a friend's house, go to Shenanigans. They are the place to watch Jack's games in Sioux Falls. They'll be on most of the screens. The sound will be on. There'll be a bunch of Jacks fans there. And I believe the Sioux Empire Staters watch party as always. So head to Shenanigans, great partner of ours. And lastly, that brings us to the big game for us on Saturday. It is SDSU going to number 8, Montana State. And once again, we are away favorites. We're favored by 6, which is weird having like all these road games.
I said that every week.
Yeah, it's too many points again. I think some people thought, oh, they're just trying to get money on Montana State, but I think it's the metrics. I think the way we've been playing, even though we're unseeded, it was due to, we've said this a bunch of times, is due to 2 plays. 2 plays go the other way, and we're a top 2 or 3 seed. And so it's easy to look at seeds and say that we should be the underdog, but in actuality, we're obviously the favorite in this instance. So we're favored by 6. I think, like I said before, I think the key for us in this game is to force them to throw the ball. Do exactly what we did to NDSU. Stuff the run game, make them panic a little bit, and see if they can beat us through the air. Because I just don't have a whole lot of faith in a quarterback that, was their Wildcat quarterback coming in and beating us through the air a bunch.
Yeah, if you look at this game, like you said, it reminds me of an NDSU style matchup, like our marker games go. It reminds me even of NDSU trying to play Quincy Patterson at quarterback. Not saying that Malott can't beat us through the air. I'm not saying that's impossible, but they have a really good defense. They got a really good defensive line. They're I think 2nd in the country in points per game allowed. They're somewhere around 6th or 7th for the most amount of sacks in the nation. But we just played NDSU this year, who was I think they're number 3 right now after playing us. We didn't give up that many sacks that game. The interesting thing to me is how are both teams going to handle this? Montana State hasn't made this deep of a run before. They're at home. They just had this giant emotional victory over the number 1 seed in the country. This freshman quarterback is now a folk legend. Like, he's already a legend in Montana. I'm 95% sure. The kid from Butte who went out and whipped the number 1 team on the road. That kid is never paying for a beer for the rest of his life. They're getting all happy handshakes and head pats right now this week, and they're going to have this huge crowd. They're going to have a huge wave of emotion. How are they going to handle it? Whereas for SDSU, it's really a lot of the same that it has been for the last 3 weeks. It's get on the plane, go out, get ready, play football. Let's see what happens. I'm really curious to see how this turns out. It should be a really fun game. If Malott passes the ball, I don't. If he has to throw it more than, say, 15, 16 times a game, I think that's a good thing for SDSU. It means they're chasing us. If he's in that 10 to 12 range, then we might be having a tough day. It should be a dogfight. We'll see how it goes.
So, are you taking the points, or who are you taking with the 6th line then?
Oh, I got to make a pick. That's right. That's my job.
Before I put my 6 in.
He wants to wait for me.
Way to hold him to task, Zach. That's awesome.
He knows he's got to go opposite of me.
Zach, I got away with it. The first round. This first pick, I got away with it and just didn't make my pick, and Blow played it, and Ben just jumped in and made his pick, and then I was able to go. But now you've outed me.
I was waiting for the pick before I say anything about this. I can't really.
Who invited this guy on? I'm gonna take. I will take. I think this is I like this matchup. I will take the Jacks. This is the matchup I liked better than a matchup against Sam Houston State because of how Sam Houston State likes to move the ball and what we're set up to best stop, and that is teams like NDSU. So I will take the Jacks.
I will. Before you go, Zach, I will. We'll save the best for last. I will take the Jacks as well. Brendan, I'm surprised you're laying your picks championship down. This is officially putting you out of it because you're down 3 points.
This is garbage. He jumped in. I didn't get to do it.
I apologize. I apologize for that. Because the previous one, you guys made your pick before. I'm like, do I need to wait for them to make their pick or what?
Yeah.
Brendan went 0-9 one week, so he has it coming to lose.
There's a reason why the pick segment is called.
I had no money in this, so. Right.
But anyway,
0-9 one week, and I'm only losing by 3, Ben.
Yeah, that doesn't say much about me, does it? No. I think I'll take SDSU -6. Like Brendan said, I think it's a better matchup for us. When I was watching the Montana State Sam Houston game, I was rooting for Montana State, and I could not believe that they were playing the way they were. Because I was happy because I think, again, it's a better matchup for us. It's an NDSU style team. I think, honestly, the same way about the JMU or NDSU game, I'll be rooting for NDSU because I think they're a better matchup for us than JMU. I think JMU can pass the ball much better than NDSU, and that's our weakness, to be honest. And so, I'll take SDSU -6. I think we win by 7 to 10, something like that.
I would take the 6-point line too. I think it's going to be 14. I think they'll do what you kind of mentioned. I think that'll be because they'll tack on a late touchdown, like you mentioned with the NDSU game. I don't think it's going to go quite like the Villanova one where they just totally steamrolled them in the second half. But I don't think going on the road is going to be an issue. I mean, this is going to be the most hostile environment they've seen since certainly the Dakota Dome or the CSU game earlier in the season. But that stadium's tough, but it's not. I mean, I've been to both. I covered the Grizz at Washington Grizzly with the Grizzlies. They're right on top of you, literally. I mean, that whole stadium is built on top of you. Bobcat Stadium, since they renovated, it's a little more like what Dana J. Dykehouse is, where there's that big kind of separation. So you don't necessarily have them right on top of you. That makes a big difference out there. It gets loud. But you've got players on this team who were there in the 2017 game, and when they won that one, that was a close one too. And I think the interesting thing is that Troy Anderson is their stud linebacker, and he was the quarterback the last time they played in Brookings. So that's a little talk
about that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of reminds me. Looking at him, I see like a little Christian Roseboom in him, but I just think SDSU's got. And they've said as much in their meetings this week. They're like, last week we thought Villanova would be a tougher match because I think they had a 3-4 alignment or something. And they said this is a little, attacking it. We feel more confident attacking it. They still have good players, though. But, something we've kind of mentioned here with the turnovers, you got to hand it to SDSU. They haven't been turnover prone in this tournament. I think they had the one interception at the end of the half, but that was just chuck it up and see if you can get something to happen. So I don't count that. Unfortunately, the freshman Tyler Feldkamp, who I think is going to be a stud down the road for him. I'm pulling for him anyway. He had 2 muffed punts. I think those are their really turnovers. So as they've been taking care of the ball, I think they'll force a couple. Can they get off the field? I saw it earlier in the comments. Can they get off the field in third downs? I saw Montana State. They weren't that good in their third down conversions in either game. They were like 5 of 16. So they're not particularly a great third down if you can get them in that passing situation. So, and I guess the last thing, it's not based on any logic, but I feel like everything SDSU's done to this point has kind of erased some of their playoff demons to this point. You think back to what happened with USD. My son's flopping around. I should get him in here before we wrap up. That USD, yeah, that's my son in the background, Terry. Can you hand him up to me, hon?
He's more patient than Brendan's dog.
Yeah, well, he makes some appearances.
He is.
This is Dean. He's
what's up, Dean?
He makes some appearances on Stig's press conferences too. He's getting near 18 months. So.
What a great looking little man you got there, man.
But, I know as I try to give you a serious analysis. No, you think about what happened at the end of the USD game. They kind of dispelled that by finishing off the Sacramento game. crazy as that was. You think about the fact that they broke out to the big lead against Southern Illinois, and they couldn't hold that lead. Well, they had the big lead against Sacramento State. They managed to finish it. And then, like I said, just the some of last week where they couldn't stop a receiver, and they've just kind of systematically erased some of the things that they went through because they've been through it already. Thank you. So, and I kind of get the feeling I had with my Chiefs when they won the Super Bowl. After a point, it's just like, I was like, I know they're going to make the Super Bowl. It doesn't mean I think they're going to win it, but you get to a point where you're confident with a team and they've just kind of been through everything until they lose. If somebody beats them straight up, they beat them straight up. But this team's just kind of overcome a lot of the things throughout, and maybe they had to go through that. I saw somebody mention on here that being unseeded was helpful for them. Maybe it was, because they've been better on the road the whole season. But they've just this playoff run, because frankly, at the halftime of that UND game, I didn't think this was possible because they were playing terribly at that point. But they've just started to kind of overcome the things that tripped them up in the season. And I think it's a snowball rolling downhill right now. And I think they've got the momentum. And I think they'll find a way to beat a pretty good. I think they'll run the ball well. I think Oladokin will make a few plays. He's been much better scrambling, I've noticed, this playoff. He's really whipped that out more than he did in the season. So it'll be a fun game, but I think they pull away. They're the more physical team. They'll pull away and win by safe margin. It'll look worse than it was.
I like it. You're basically saying we've paid our dues and it's our time.
Yeah, like I said, doesn't guarantee I think they're going to win the title, because anything can happen when you get to that point. But I feel like they're a veteran team. I kind of remember another pro example I'll use was the old Denver Broncos. When they won it in '97, they had to go as a wild card. And I remember they had a lot of veterans who'd been through playoff wars, and they said, Bill Romanowski said, he told their coach after they lost a game in the season, we're going to have to do this the hard way, but we're going to do it. And I think that's just the confidence this team has.
Yeah,
I like it.
I think we're in that playoff gear right now, that playoff mode that we got so sick of the team up north fans saying, but it just really feels like they just went, it's playoff time, and just hit another gear, and they've been going from there.
Yeah, and I think that's we talked about them getting maybe not physically burnt out, but mentally burnt out from so many games in a calendar year. And so I think it's helped being in the playoffs to kind of give them that mental edge of, if we don't play well, we're done. And so, yeah, I think that's part of what's come from. We've seemed to be a little more mentally in tune and focused. But we've gone past an hour, which is always our we always say we're not going to go past an hour, but we have. We want to be respectful of your time, Zach. We thank you for joining us. Do you have anything you'd like to plug before we go?
I'll certainly keep, certainly tune on our Dakota News Now. We're on enough TV stations now and enough times a day. Check out the web. We've had a lot of good stuff on our webpage. I did a story on Tolu Gurnday, who's been going through a lot recently. Obviously, he lost his dad right before senior day. Also has his own clothing line. It's really not even that much about the football. It's just he's a really terrific dude, and maybe. I haven't bought anything yet from his line because I'm depending on the holiday thing, but check his finesse and grind line out. And like I said, if you're wanting to chat a little bit during the game on Saturday, I'll have a live chat going. I'm going to bring in a guest this time, Josh Anderson from Dakota State, who's an ex-SDSU assistant, also a former Bison, so he kind of knows both sides. So I'm sure he'll be watching that game. He was terrific. We had our post-game show during the FCS Spring Championship, and he had terrific analysis for us. So he'll be a fun one to also kind of shoot the breeze with, because we'll be a little more off the cuff on a Facebook live stream. But yeah, like I said, just join us, and I think we'll have some fun on Saturday. And if they make it to Frisco, who knows what we'll do, but we'll do a lot. So
good deal.
Awesome. And we'll hit it hard. I promise you that.
Good. Yeah.
All right. Good.
We'll make sure to find your link and tweet it out to all of our followers. I'm sure they'd really enjoy that.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have put I'm at Iceborg. So
there
nickname a guy from Sports Center gave me once upon a time, so it's stuck.
I like it. All right, like Jim says, it's time, as we always do. We say go big, go blue, go Jack.
Go Jack.